Warning. Within this fiction video, heavy subjects will be addressed such as mental illness disorders, school shootings, toxic relationships, and other assorted issues. If these are things you don't feel comfortable hearing about, I understand if you don't wish to continue watching this video. I first heard about Nubia when it was first announced and there was some negative reactions, but I was working on another project at the time so I didn't pay much attention and completely forgot about it. Sometime later, a review of the comic was recommended and when I watched it, oh boy. That first review had me wondering how similar this would be to the I Am Not Starfire fiasco. Head first, I dived into the rabbit hole and holy shit. With I Am Not Starfire, people didn't like it, but they had fun with it. And so did I when I did my fixing video on the comic. But with Nubia, it seemed that everyone had come to the same conclusion. It was offensive, biased, poorly written, and overall just bad to the point that some have stated that it could very well be harmful to its young audience. Normally, I would never consider touching a comic like this just because of the sensitive subject matter, but also because people might jump to the wrong conclusion because of who the writer is and the bold statement she's made with this comic. However, because this comic has been very heavily criticized, I feel safe to attempt to rewrite the story. With that said, there are some things I need to address beforehand. First of all, I'm not black, and I do feel that I need to be cautious when going about rewriting this comic, just like I did when rewriting Raya and the Last Dragon. And I think I did an okay job because I haven't gotten any negative comments saying that I disrespected the Southeast Asian community. Please don't take this as me claiming that I can write a better story about a black character than an actual black writer. If anything, I think this teaches us that it's easy to stereotype, even if you do come from that community, and that we need to always be aware, mindful, and knowledgeable about what we're writing. The second thing I want to address is the art. I will be honest, I don't like the style, and I didn't like the art style in I Am Not Starfire. I personally don't like a lot of the artistic styles that a lot of young adult graphic novels use, but it's understandable why it's used. It's simple, which probably makes it faster to draw, and if another artist is brought on, it should be easy to mimic, unlike Todd McFarlane or Sana Takada's art. I think the main complaint was the quality of the art and not so much the style. I did notice something interesting. In some of the panels, the characters are multicolored, but in others, they're just one color. I get that this is used to convey that it's either a flashback or the character is monologuing in their head, but on some of the pages, I don't understand the reasoning in changing the color scheme when it's still the same scene and there's no change in the subject. I don't like to speculate, but this does have me wondering if perhaps the artist was having issues meeting her deadlines. That could explain why some of the drawings are low quality, and if for whatever reason she needed to go back and redraw some of the panels, that could explain the sudden change in color schemes. The third thing I want to talk about is the subject within the comic. I don't know any other way of saying this, but the writer was preaching. That's the only thing that comes to mind when thinking about this comic. Clearly, she wanted to address political and social issues, and that's fine. In fact, that could have worked if this was an anthology, or instead addressing these issues in small amounts, or maybe just focusing on one specifically. This is a coming-of-age story, and I would think that that would mean that it's character-driven. But it feels more plot-driven, and I think that's because the writer did not want to compromise, and that's part of the writing process is compromising, in order to get a cohesive story. Choosing what goes where and when and what needs to be scrapped, it felt like the plot came first over the characters, which is upsetting given this character isn't all that well known. I sure as hell knew nothing about Nubia before or after reading this comic. If anything, this comic tells more about the writer than the actual main character. The main conflict for the main character in the comic is racism, and that's fine, but how is Nubia overcoming it? What's the point of creating these conflicts if there's no proper resolution? Nubia is seen confronting racism in two different ways. She's either passive and does nothing, as seen with the cop and the clerk at the beginning of the comic, or she deals with it through violence. Something else I noticed is that she kind of gets more violent throughout the comic. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's what I noticed. We see these examples when she assaults a cop. However, I don't think that scene was motivated by racism. And let's not forget Waylon. Nubia punches him for his remark, but she did it after the conflict seemed to have been over because she walked away first and Waylon didn't say anything. There's all these not very good examples of racism, but how is Nubia overcoming it, specifically in a positive way? That's the thing about racism. It's an individual thing due to ignorance and lack of knowledge. Sometimes people change from those points of views, and other times sometimes you can't get them to move for anything. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to enlighten them at the very least. That's what Nubia could have done. She could have gone back and had a talk with the store clerk, or she could have confronted Waylon, possibly in private so there's no pressure to put up a front. And if the writer was confident enough, Nubia could have even had a conversation with a police officer that arrested her. Could have, would have, should have. I will be making significant changes in this rewrite, and one of them that I knew I was going to change was the timeline. There are so many different versions of Diana leaving Themyscira and becoming Wonder Woman in different eras that I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch to change things up in this rewrite, especially since young adult graphic novels tend to exist in their own little pocket universe despite them being part of the franchise. So I don't think it's too much of an egregious change to divert from the well-known timeline. Meaning, my version will take place before Wonder Woman. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to give Nubia a chance to be her own character and not force her to live up to the expectations we all have for Wonder Woman. Hopefully with other comic adaptations, Nubia will get the story she deserves. Normally I don't do this, but I'm going to go ahead and address the character changes. We really didn't get to know the characters all that much, or even Nubia, such as what they like or dislike, their goals and aspirations. It's details like those that helps the readers relate to the characters. Let's start with Keisha. Keisha is an outspoken, opinionated woman. I don't recall her talking about her family, but when I think of Keisha, I envision a big family. I see Keisha having an older brother that she can go to for advice and two younger siblings that help keep her grounded. As for her parents, her mother is a coroner while her father is deployed, and in case you're wondering why that is, that leads to the additions I made with Jason's family. We get a little more context with Jason. We know he has a father and a grandmother. The thing about Jason, he's the only one who briefly mentions his father, and one of the main complaints in the comic is a lack of positive male role models. That's why Keisha's father's deployed. He's a soldier fighting for his country and setting an example for his children. Another main complaint was the negative portrayal of police officers. This gave me the idea to take these two misrepresented subjects, combine them to make a new character, Jason's father, Bo. When creating this character, my mind went to Miles Morales' father from Into the Spider-Verse and Virgil's father from Static Shock. Both fathers are police officers that love their children but have trouble expressing their feelings. But when hits the fan, they are always there for their families. Because this is Nubia's story and not Jason's, Jason does have a good relationship with his father, and Nubia will be the one developing a relationship with Jason's father. In a very platonic, innocent way, I want to make that very clear. Now on to Waylon. Besides racism, Waylon was basically the second antagonist. That's how I see it. In the comic, he explains why he was pursuing Keisha. Personally, I think this was him trying to save face because he got embarrassed, and it appeared that at the rally where Keisha turned him down for the final time, that seemed to have been the final straw that triggered Waylon to commit the school shooting. So many things wrong with this, let's dissect it one at a time. First of all, it really did feel like Waylon really did like Keisha, but it was clear that she was not interested in him, but the comic contradicts itself. In one panel, Waylon asks Keisha out and she says, "We've talked about this," which I assume is her telling him she's not interested. But in another panel, Nubia asks her why she doesn't tell him to leave her alone, indicating that Keisha never set any boundaries with Waylon. You see how confusing this is? And to top it off, Keisha admits that she's afraid of Waylon and Nubia does not encourage her to seek adult help. Terrific message to give to young girls. If a guy's harassing you, don't tell anyone, just put up with it. The incident at the party, I feel, needed extra panels to know how it came down to that. After everything we're told about how Keisha feels about Waylon, I would think that when she sees him at the fire pit, she would just avoid him completely and not go there. We are shown that Waylon was already at the fire pit prior. This has me wondering if at some point Waylon may have stepped away. Like I said, extra panels would have really helped to see how it played out and give insight to young girls reading this, signs of a situation escalating out of control so they know when to remove themselves from it. With all that being said, these are the changes I'm making. Waylon is still an asshole, but he's not a racist asshole. I genuinely believe he did have a crush on Keisha in the comic, but pursued her in a blatant misogynist way. In my rewrite, the two of them have dated, but it was an unhealthy, toxic relationship that resulted in Keisha developing an eating disorder that caused her to gain weight. The two of them have broken up and Keisha has lost the extra weight that she gained during their relationship. However, she still does struggle to control her disorder. A lot of disorders are often psychological that sometimes develop due to stressful situations and changes within our environment that we're just not mentally prepared to deal with at that moment. Once a person develops a disorder, there will always be a risk of it being triggered again, but with the right support, it can be controlled. I promise you, there is a reason that I'm adding this in. As for the main conflict, I do feel that school shootings is an issue that doesn't get enough attention until after it happens. In the comic, there was no build up to it, which depending on the story can be a good or bad thing. In this case, I don't think it was, because it happened not too long after the protest, and in my opinion, that should have been the main conflict. Not to mention, the protest was heavily mentioned throughout the entire comic, suggesting that to be the stage for the final showdown. Instead, it was all leading to the violent act of one person, not even with his group of friends, all to get revenge on a girl that rejected him, even though it appeared he had gotten his revenge when the police disbanded the protest that Keisha specifically organized. To better build the suspense for the school shooting in my rewrite, I'm going to bring in new characters that progress the conflict throughout the story. That's all the changes that I wanted to address before the rewrite. Man, that was a lot. Normally I don't talk this much beforehand, but like I previously said, this comic is a bit of a sensitive subject and the additions I'm putting in are just as sensitive. I will give a heads up when a sensitive issue is coming up, but if it's still too much, I completely understand if you need to stop. Before we start, I want to emphasize that I'm not a professional of any kind, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I think I've rambled on long enough, so let's go ahead and get into the rewrite. Enjoy. An alarm is sounded on the island of Themyscira, but the culprit managed to escape. Hippolyta summons one of her most loyal and skilled warriors, Amira. She kneels before her queen, anticipating her orders. However, it is a mother that she is in the presence of, who begs her to retrieve what was stolen from her. Never before seeing her queen like this, Amira vows to complete her mission. Unfortunately, the mission is time sensitive. I beg you, Amira, bring her back before her first year. I do not want to have to choose. Amira sets off, tracking down every lead she could, refusing to leave any stone unturned. This, however, put unnecessary attention on herself. Obstacles arose, leaving her battered and injured. Despite this, she refuses to relent. With a couple more close calls and a few unavoidable battles, Amira follows a promising lead that brings her to a stronghold high up in the mountains. She carefully makes her way through the elaborate structure and finally finds Hippolyta's stolen daughter, Diana's twin sister, Nubia. Amira tries to take her, but the shield won't allow her any closer. If Amira manages to dismantle the shield, all those within will know she's there. Not to mention, this could very well summon the master of the stronghold, but that is a risk Amira has no choice but to take. She breaks through the shield and an alarm goes off. Amira scoops Nubia in her arms and makes haste. She does her best to avoid confrontation, but because of this, it doesn't take long for her to get outnumbered and cornered. Fighting her way through is not an option, neither is surrendering, leaving only one. Gripping Nubia tightly, Amira jumps out the window. She positions her body before landing, but due to the terrain, it causes a series of falls. Every time she hits the ground, it takes a little out of her. Finally, she manages to stop. Amira's body is exhausted. All she can do is tuck Nubia underneath so she stays warm. Luckily, their pursuers can't find them, giving Amira time to rest. Unfortunately, this causes her to lose track of time, increasing the need to return to Themyscira as quickly as possible. Finally, Amira crosses the threshold, announcing her return. She's greeted by the queen and a fellow warrior. When she attempts to bring the boat ashore, she's quickly met with hostility. Immediately, Amira kneels in shame, realizing she's past due. She'll accept whatever punishment, but begs for the child to be spared. If I was just a mother, there would be no doubt. But I am also a queen that has an obligation to put my people first before my own needs. What harm is there to bring home a child? Bending the rule for one and expecting the rest to follow would be fair to none. With a heavy heart, Hippolyta cannot allow her daughter to return. As for Amira, in all her years of combat, this is her first defeat. Despite the unfortunate result, there is hope. Hippolyta tells Amira to rise, for she has a new mission for her. Supplies are placed in the boat. Asking as a mother, Hippolyta requests that Amira raises Nubia as her own in man's world. Amira is stunned by the request, but accepts the task, if only to make up for her failure. Hippolyta catches a glimpse of her daughter as Amira sails away, and it all becomes too much for her. I know you're all thinking what the hell, so let me explain. First of all, there are different iterations as to why the Amazons live on Themyscira and rules that they live by. So I'm just going to take what works best for this rewrite, so bear with me guys. To my understanding, Hippolyta has remained Themyscira's one and only queen. I am aware in other versions she does die and others ascend the throne, but that's all after Wonder Woman makes her appearance. Also, I'm not too sure how the Amazons' immortality works and if it goes away if or when they leave the island, so for clarity's sake, let's say it does. From what I've seen, Hippolyta is a fairly decent queen that is loved by her people, and one of the few times that her authority is challenged was through Wonder Woman's origin story. My interpretation of this is that she is a genuine ruler that knows when to hold and when to fold. With all that in mind, if she was to allow Nubia to return, this could cause conflict amongst the other Amazons. For one, no society is perfect. People are going to break rules, big or small. When it comes time to punish them for it, it will most likely be seen unfair that they're being punished for breaking a small rule compared to Nubia, who unintentionally broke a big one. This could very well lead to the Amazons being resentful towards Nubia, maybe even Diana as well. Not to mention that Hippolyta's ruling could be put into question due to this as well. Because Hippolyta's been in charge for so long, it makes sense that she would have a foresight to predict something like this happening. That's what I'm basing her decision on. Even though she's doing this to spare Nubia from possibly being shunned by her fellow Amazons, Hippolyta is still a mother, and I think she deserves to have a moment to grieve, and that's what really motivated me to write this entire sequence. A group of friends play basketball. Jason blocks Nubia from shooting, so Nubia passes it to Keisha, who isn't far from the hoop but overshoots. Nubia sprints to the ball in time to catch it before it hits the ground and score the point. If her friends wasn't so used to her athletic abilities, they'd be godsmacked right now. Instead, Jason complains that it isn't fair, 2 against 1. From the entrance of the court, they hear someone offer to be Jason's partner. It's Oscar. Nubia blushes. Before the round can begin, it's interrupted. Blue tells them they'd like to have the court. No way, we were here first. There's 5 of us and 4 of you. I think it's only fair that the group with the most use the court. Let's just go, there's no point arguing. The group of friends walk away defeated, but things only seem to get worse as a police car flags the group of friends down. It's Jason's father. You stalking us or something? This is my patrol route. If I wanted to stalk you, I'd do it while you were at school. Now be nice or you don't get these. Bo pulls out cold slushies and some snacks. As much as he wanted a slushie himself, he gave his to Oscar so he wouldn't feel left out. He asks for the score and Jason bitterly answers 2-0, as Nubia and Keisha smirk. Knowing who scored the points, Bo encourages Nubia to sign up for a sports team, but she sheepishly answers that her mother wants her to focus on her studies. Since she only has 1 year of school left after this one, Bo understands and returns to his patrol. The friends try to decide what to do next when Oscar spots Mateo's crew. Everyone silently watches as his crew makes their way to Blue's crew. Jason urges them to leave before anything happens. Keisha and Oscar agree, but Nubia intensely watches as there's a child's playground on the other side of the basketball court. The crews inches closer to each other, and Nubia unknowingly takes a step towards them. Her body instinctively readies itself, but it all dissipates when 2 police cruisers roll up, one of them being Bo. Nubia snaps out of her intense gaze and is startled by her friends. What? What the hell was that? You looked like a lion ready to pounce on a gazelle or something. It was actually pretty cool. There is a lot to unpack here, so let's get started. First of all, let's talk about the 2 additions I made. I already talked about how I was going to build up for the school shooting to be the main conflict, and I don't want it to be the act of one individual. I wanted these 2 crews to be an embodiment of a specific issue and the devastating results it can lead to. I won't say what it is right now, but there's a purpose for it. I want to make it clear, though, that my examples is just a simplified version of a more complex issue. The reason I have the friends playing basketball is because I felt that would be a better introduction while showing their closeness by doing an activity where they are working together rather than have them loitering outside a convenience store. Because what does that offer? What does that tell the reader about this group of friends besides just info dumping the current situation? As for the conflict within this scene, scene or lack thereof, I'm aware that when it comes to comics, specifically superhero comics, there needs to be a hook that gets the readers invested, and oftentimes a fight is used to grab the reader's attention. For this comic, a robbery takes place and Nubia reveals her powers to disarm the robbers, which leads to a misunderstanding, which leads to a whole iceberg of another issue. Anyway, I didn't put a fight in, specifically because it's a little too soon, and also because right now I'm setting up characters and introducing new ones, and I don't want to overcomplicate things just yet. Instead, I want to hint for right now at Nubia's awakening powers, because in my version, her powers have yet to awaken. It's not really so much her powers, but her dormant warrior instincts that are coming out in this scene. A lot of the reviews that I watched all kind of agree that Nubia comes off biased on who she helps. It also doesn't help that the writer only ever puts her friends in the center of the danger, specifically Keisha and Oscar. That's what prompted me to reconstruct the entire introduction. Now on to Bo. Like I said, Bo is going to be that positive male role model that many said was lacking in the comic. I want to show that he is a considerate man by showing him bringing the kids slushies and snacks, and even giving his to Oscar. Because he's a cop that possibly has seen the worst humanity has to offer, I think he would be a little controlling by always wanting to know where his son is and what he's doing. I want to make it clear it's out of love, and most parents do go through that realization that they need to let their child go. I think that's enough info dumping, so let's return back to your daily schedule program. Taking in the scenery, a car pulls up beside them. It's Oscar's cousin, Louis. He tells Oscar to get in, but Oscar hesitantly tells him he's good. But when Louis glares at him, Oscar apologizes to the others. Nubia wants to say something, but chooses not to. She watches as the car drives off. You'd never think that a guy like Oscar would hang out with a bastard like Louis. If only they weren't related. With it back down to 3, they decide to head to Jason's place to play some games. But Keisha gets a call telling her that she needs to pick up her younger siblings from the library. Something came up and her mom can't do it. Jason offers to give her a ride since they're not far from his house. Nubia opts to just go home, saying she wants to take a shower. The friends part ways, and when Nubia gets home, the aroma of moussaka greets her at the door. Danielle's surprised to see her so soon. Nubia doesn't want to tell her all that transpired. She doesn't want her to worry. Instead, she just reiterates the last part. As Nubia takes a shower, she intensely watches the water as it moves in slow motion. She hears every individual drop hit the floor. She's surprised that they don't all make the same sound. It puts her in a trance until her phone alerts her of a text. Nubia finishes her shower, but doesn't get time to respond as Danielle calls for her. Danielle setting the table and asks Nubia to fetch her mother from the garden. Barefooted, Nubia makes her way into the garden. Every time Nubia enters the garden, she always feels that she's being transported somewhere else. Danielle loves picking fresh vegetables, and Nubia too has spent plenty of hours in the garden. But truth is, they had very little to do with its growth. Her mother, Amira, is very particular with the garden and very much prefers to do it all herself. Dinner's ready. Wow, the garden just keeps getting bigger every year. Why won't you let the magazine do an article in your garden? I didn't make this garden for the approval of strangers. Danielle said you did it because you didn't trust the food at the grocery store. I still don't, but living so close to the city makes it hard to be self-reliant. By the way, what was the score? Oh, Keisha and I got 2 points, and Jason, 0. That's all? Well, we were interrupted, and it's ridiculous to fight over a court. Don't be afraid to stand your ground, Nubia. But isn't fighting wrong? There's a difference between holding your ground and throwing a punch. What if you throw the punch? What then? You stand your ground. The conversation ends. That night, Nubia is visited by a familiar dream. A dream that she holds dear and has not shared with anyone. It's always the same dream with the same mysterious woman. Lately, however, the dream has been ending on a more sour note, rather than the pleasant ones that she had when she was a child. It starts with pleasant humming, but always ends in tears. After the park, my goal was to show Amira and show how she's been coping since her exile, but more importantly, I wanted to show some interaction between her and Nubia to give an insight on their relationship, which will be more elaborated on the further we go. Personally, I feel that Nubia's relationship with her parents, specifically Amira, was lacking in the comic, and it just kind of felt a little sloppy. Not to mention, the way Amira talks about having to contact Dee and having to do damage control in front of Nubia, it's understandable why Nubia is so insecure in the comic. It was brought on by her parents, specifically Amira. That would be fine if the story had a proper resolution about that, but the scene that we get in the comic makes it come off as if Nubia is trying to get out of trouble. Also, I know I'm probably going to get some shit for this, but having Nubia address Danielle by her first name, that's just to make it easier for myself as I write and record this. And finally, the dream. There is significance to it, and that's all I'll say about it. One more thing, if you haven't caught on yet, Nubia is passive by nature and avoid confrontation. That was something she struggled with in the comic as well. Her conversation with Amira is a spark, and we'll see how that transgresses throughout the story. Quick side note, I didn't realize how much time Keisha's braids would take to draw. It's just taking up a lot of time, and I'm going to make the choice to change her hairstyle to make it easier on me so that way I can draw the characters as quickly as possible for whatever scene I need them in. I hope you understand, I don't mean anything by it, it's just easier for me this way. Another change that I made to make things easier on myself is that the school that Nubia goes to has a uniform policy. Again, just to make it easier on myself, hope you understand. At school, all anyone can talk about is the party happening tonight. Nubia is nervous since she has yet to mention it to either one of her parents. She's not too worried about Danielle, but knows that she'll always side with Amira, and Amira very rarely says yes to anything. Both Keisha and Jason has met Nubia's parents and knows she's not exaggerating. Keisha glances at Jason's leftover fries. He tries to offer some to her, but before Keisha can respond, she gets a notification from an influencer she's following. It's an IRL stream of a protest happening in the city. God, I wish I was there right now. Why can't I be 18 already? Marching is so cool, and it's always for a cause. Until some selfish asshole ruins it for everyone. Jason tells examples that his father told him. Keisha still wants to protest, but Nubia ponders. The mood grows sour as another standoff occurs between the two crews, with Keisha's ex amongst them. They both know better than to start anything on school grounds, but that doesn't mean they won't try to bait each other. Thankfully, nothing happens. With the mood liveling back up, Keisha blurts out that she's figured out how Nubia can go to the party without telling her parents. Nubia can spend the night at her place, claiming it to be for studying. Nubia's not all that sold, since it'll be last minute, but Jason urges her to try anyway. How do you even know that your mom's gonna say yes to me coming over? My mom's working a double shift. The way she sees it, you're free babysitting. All she has to do is feed you. Damn, thanks for making me question our friendship. Oh hell, is that why your mom's always so cool when I come over last minute? Nubia sends a carefully worded text to Daniela with both Keisha and Jason's approval. The friends cheer with joy, catching the attention of their peers sitting next to them. With this rewrite, I want to try and keep everything that was in the comic, which includes the party, the protest, the school shooting, and even the cops, but address it all in moderation. With the protest, I knew I wanted to mention it, but not spend too much time on it, especially since I'm not too knowledgeable in that stuff, and that's kind of what led me to write it this way. On surface level, specifically to an adolescent, protesting looks cool, never mind the reason for the protest. I think it is important to show ignorance in your characters because it shows that they still have learning to do, and it's interesting to see how the characters perceive things after gaining some wisdom, which Jason already has because his father's a cop, and obviously Bo would want to prepare his son of the harsh realities of the world, meaning there are people that put themselves first over others. Another reason why Jason is essentially the voice of reason is because what the f did he contribute in the comic? As for Keisha, I'm trying to hint at her disorder without putting too much spotlight on her because this is Nubia's story. Jason gives them a ride to Keisha's house, but can't stay. He has practice and needs to pick up his gear from home. Nubia hasn't been here in a while as they find Keisha's older brother Josh in the kitchen. You know the dishes are supposed to go in the cupboards, right? Mom got Chinese and she wants us to eat off of plates instead of out of boxes. Is she gonna wash them? If she wanted to wash dishes, she wouldn't have had kids. Nubia and I can't stay too long after dinner. The party, right? Just make sure you're back before curfew. Remember, Mom's got that tracking app. Luna comes running in and grabs Nubia's leg. Nubia gently picks her up and plays hot and cold to her room. When Luna finally says fire, they reach her newly decorated room. Luna has moved from wanting to be a princess and now wants to be a warrior elf. Luna, how many times do I have to tell you? Stop putting stickers on my door. Nubia. Hey, T, sorry. It's alright. Everyone's still getting used to it. Keisha yells from downstairs that dinner has arrived and their mother. When Nubia brings the young ones down, they all say grace before digging in. Keisha carefully watches how much her family gets out and makes sure that her portions doesn't exceed theirs. What time do you girls plan to leave for the party? 8 or maybe a little after. It depends on how long Jason's practice runs. So what are you girls gonna wear? Oh, we forgot about that. We'll think of something. I have a few dresses I've been holding on to, hoping to squeeze back in them someday, but I think it's time to be realistic. Nubia tries to argue, insisting that she doesn't want to be any trouble, but both Keisha and her mother stand united against her. After they get done eating, they all head to Nicole's bedroom, where she lays out her outfits and tells Nubia to pick whichever one she wants. She leaves the girls to get ready, as she too needs to leave pretty soon. A little after 8, Jason calls saying he's outside. The reason for this scene is to give more insight into Keisha and give her more personality. She did have that in the comic, but it felt two-dimensional. Another reason I wrote this is because the comic preaches about certain social injustice on a specific community, but at no point do we get to see any part of that community. Not even at the protest, because it's all focused on Nubia and her friends. That's another thing. Nubia does not interact with anyone that isn't her friends or her family, and if she does, it's usually a negative interaction, which is odd. Here and throughout the rest of the rewrite, I do want Nubia to interact with others outside her established circle. On their way to the party, Nubia's nerves to her surprise start to ease. Keisha starts ranting about all who's going to be there and fantasizes about the celebrities that could attend. This isn't a movie. The party is being held by a senior from our public school. Their parents are rich, so who knows who they've been rubbing elbows with. Gross. I doubt any celebrities are going to show up, but he'll probably be there. After all, this is his neighborhood. Don't worry, we moved on, and it's not like this will be my first time seeing him after our breakup. We go to the same school after all. Jason wants to stick together just in case, but Keisha won't have it. She argues that they're going to have fun, not babysit. When they arrive, Jason makes them all promise that if any of them feels uncomfortable, they let the others know, regardless. The friends enter the luxurious house and are overwhelmed by the lengths the host went to accommodate their guests, making them question if they're in the right house. Maybe we will see a celebrity. The friends enjoy themselves alongside their classmates. On the dance floor, Nubia locks eyes with Oscar. They awkwardly dance beside each other, but when the music pivots, they lose themselves in the beat. Keisha leaves to get herself a drink, but then hears a familiar voice say her name. With the music starting to slow, Oscar asks Nubia if she wants to take a break. She's actually not all that tired, but says yes anyway. As for Jason, he goes for the food. This quick scene was to set the stage for what's about to take place at the party. For Nubia, the party is where she and Oscar start to bond, but it's over her powers and their dislike of Waylon. However, I want to use this to do a little info dumping because it will be important later. I know I say that a lot, but I promise it will be. Waylon convinces Keisha to go somewhere private so they can talk. She hesitantly does so she doesn't ruin the mood for her friends. Nubia and Oscar find themselves outside at the fire pit where there's little people. It's awkward again, but the fire reminds Nubia of all the times she went camping with her mother when she was younger. Danielle only went once and hated it. However, when she describes it to Oscar, he can't help but compare it to survivalist training. Nubia's a little caught off guard by the comment, but regardless, those are some of her fondest memories with her mother. Do you still go camping? Not since I started high school. If I'm being honest, things have been a little strained between the two of us since then. It's natural that things get a little awkward between kids and their parents. It is? How so? Well, between that uncomfortable thing that no one likes to talk about called puberty, and then us trying to learn to be independent from our parents along with us trying to figure out what we want, can, and should do after high school, it's understandable that our relationships with our parents might fall through the cracks a little. Even if that is the case, is it natural for the rift to only be with one parent? Before Oscar can respond, he gets a call. It's Lewis. Nubia can see that he wants to ignore it, but gives in. Oscar walks away to talk in private. Nubia tries not to eavesdrop, but can't help herself and isolate the noise around her like she did in the shower. She hears Oscar and his slightly aggressive conversation with his cousin, who's demanding that he leave the party. Oscar insists that he's not going to, but his tone says otherwise. The call ends. Nubia, I'm sorry, but you don't have to do what he says all the time. You were listening? How? He's not your father. Stand your ground. You don't owe him anything. I have to go. With Oscar's leave, Nubia doesn't feel like staying herself. However, she's not the only one with boy trouble. I don't know if I should have mentioned this earlier, but I didn't know how without it coming off forced. Nubia and Amira's relationship is strained, and I try to kind of hint at it with their interaction, and it will play a big part in Nubia's character development, which we will get more insight in part 2. Now, at the beginning of the video, I talked about the changes I made with Keisha's character and hinted at them throughout the video, and now it's time to confront it. So, this is your warning. This is where things are going to get a little sensitive. There will be mention of mental illness disorder, toxic controlling relationship. If it's hitting too close to home, it's fine to skip ahead or stop completely. I won't hold it against you. Waylon has just confessed that he wants to get back together. Keisha is stunned and mortified. You can't be serious. What the hell brought this on? No one understands me like you do, and you gotta admit, we were good together. Waylon, what we were, was toxic and unhealthy. You're exaggerating. Have I ever hit you or raised my voice to you? No, but what you did do was control the relationship. I could never have an opinion outside of yours, and if I did voice my opinion, public or private, you'd make me feel that what I said was either stupid or wrong, which would make me feel embarrassed or ashamed. You're blowing it all out of proportion. And that's what you would do right there. And I would believe you, so I'd stop saying anything and hold it all in, and as a result, I would eat. So it's my fault that you have no self-control? No, it's mine, but you just didn't care enough to help. It was my family and friends that got me through that. So because I'm not the perfect boyfriend, you'll just wash your hands of me? Despite our failures to make it work, I do care about you, and that's why I put up with it for so long. Because you're holding things in too, but I won't be the dam that holds the water back anymore. I say this with love. You need help. Nothing else is exchanged, and Keisha walks out. She was not prepared for this, and the nerves get to her as she stares down the buffet. She sees Jason, who asks if she's okay, but it all becomes too much for her and she runs out of the house. Jason runs after her. The comic was obviously steering towards the direction of strong female empowerment, and that's fine. But by putting the female characters in certain situations, specifically Keisha, it's important to show them overcoming their hardships, specifically because this is a young adult graphic novel. However, the main solution used is violence. That's where I think the comic falls short on. Despite what people may think of the comic, I do think a lot of people can relate with Keisha on what she's going through with Waylon. However, at no point does anyone try to prevent the issue from escalating by telling an adult or encouraging Keisha to seek adult assistance. As a result, the problem just kept escalating until this was the final result. I have witnessed this happen firsthand, where there was plenty of red flags, but they kept getting ignored until finally the situation damn nearly turned fatal. With this rewrite, I wanted to show empowerment by not only having Keisha confront it in a non-violent way, but also taking accountability. No one wants or should victim blame, but at the same time, there is a certain amount of accountability that the person in that situation needs to address. The reason situations escalate the way they do is because that negative behavior is enabled with excuses such as, it was a one-time thing, it was my fault, they're getting help. That's great that they're getting help, but that's not your problem. I hope I portrayed all these sensitive subjects correctly. I did do some research for this. If I got some things wrong, I do apologize. And please, if any of you watching this is going through something like this, please seek help. You don't deserve what is happening to you. Jason calls Nubia saying it's time to leave. Nubia quickly weaves her way through the house to get to the front door, but a gathering has taken place. Curiosity gets the better of her. The reason for the commotion is the two crews. Both crews are in each other's face, demanding the other to leave. The senior who's throwing the party demands they all leave. Or what? You'll call the cops? How much did this party cost your parents? How much do you think they'll appreciate the cops being called? Probably more than you. If she doesn't call the cops, I will, and show them this video of you refusing to leave after the homeowner asked you to. This sparks others to hold their phones and start recording. Mateo looks at Blue, reminding her that she was asked to leave too. Blue glances at Nubia and takes her leave with her crew following. Mateo follows suit but takes one final look at Nubia before going. The tension quickly starts to dissolve and the party resumes. Nubia receives a text from Jason asking what's taken her. Finally, Nubia leaves, but when she gets to the car, she's greeted by an aggravated Jason. What the hell took you? Sorry, something came up. Why are you so mad? Keisha, what's wrong? I just want to go home. Jason drives back to Keisha's place as Keisha recounts her talk with Waylon. When they arrive, Jason requests to speak to Nubia alone. The girls can see that he's still upset and Keisha wants to mediate. Jason clears the air real quick, insisting that he's not mad at Nubia and apologizes for snapping at her. Nubia can see that he's sincere and asks Keisha to go ahead inside. Keisha reluctantly does so out of respect for both of them. What's going on, Jason? She puts up a brave face. If I hadn't known her since we were kids, I'd fall for it too. We shouldn't have left her. Keisha's not your responsibility. I knew something was going on with her, and when she started to gain weight, that confirmed it, but I stayed silent. Jason, we all had a feeling something was up. You're not the only one that chose not to say anything. But I knew it was because of him. My dad always says that a man protects his own. I knew what he was, and I didn't warn her. So what does that make me? Human. Jason feels better getting this off his chest. Nubia's happy they've cleared the air, and the friends call it a night. The final scene at the party was specifically to show that the tension between the two crews is growing. Just like Keisha's relationship with Waylon grew in a negative direction due to lack of action, the specific intention I had for writing this scene was for Nubia. All superhero stories have these moments where the young hero-to-be is faced with a choice of minding their own business or intervening. At the park, Nubia was unintentionally preparing to intervene for the sake of young children, but the situation was de-escalated before she could make a choice. But here at the party, she is making the conscious choice to step in. Not to mention, her friends are outside, so there's no reason for her to get involved. But she's choosing to do so due to the influence of her conversation with Amira. One more thing. I'm going to repeat what others have said about the male characters in this comic. I specifically heard this from male reviewers. They voiced their concern that whether or not the design of the male characters was due to the art style, they couldn't help but feel that it was intentional that these supposed straight males were being feminized due to their ethnicity. I don't know anything about this, but I did kind of want to address this in my own little way by having Jason question his manhood, but not due to his sexuality, instead his actions or lack thereof that has him questioning this. I would think a lot of guys do go through this at some point in their life, specifically since there's such a double standard for men. That's it. That's the end of part 1. Originally, I thought I could do this rewrite in one video, but as I'm typing the script, I just don't think that's possible without going over 30 minutes, and I learned my lesson from doing my Obi-Wan Kenobi videos. So I'm going to do this in parts. A lot of heavy topics were talked about and were not done. I hope I talked about these subjects in a way that you watching can take something away from. This is a very tricky rewrite with very sensitive subject matter. Whether you think Ella McKinney did a decent job or not addressing these subjects, I give her props for trying. I'm not saying my version is any better by any means. If you like the comic just the way it is, that's fine. In the end of the day, my opinion is just one in an ocean of opinions. I hope you like the rewrite so far. Please let me know what you think and like and subscribe.